Hey, Money Magnets! I'm your host, Dr. Amanda, and if you're a coach, entrepreneur, or service-based business owner, you're in the right place to learn law of attraction strategies that will help you get into productive action, improve your client attraction, and turn on your money magnetism so that you can experience rapid business growth. And in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing essential resources for big transformations and big transitions in your life and business. And this episode is going to be very raw, and I'm going to really share quite a bit about my process that I've been going through in growing my business. And in big ways, this will be an inspirational episode by sharing with you things that I struggle with so that you know you're not alone. And I'm going to give you resources to use when you're going through transitions that feel hard and scary. And so for those of you who are new here, I took the month of July off. And I went through a lot in July, and it's been just a huge month, the month of July, of big transformation and big transition. And as we all know, when you are in a big transition, it's because you're on that spiral growth curve. So for those of you who've been on video with me, you know that I have tattoos of spirals, and my office is filled with spirals, and I am obsessed with spirals because I like to remember that we grow in a spiral growth curve. And what I mean by that is if you look at a spiral and you're in the center, you've got to go down to get to the next evolution of the up, which means you've got to be in the trenches. You've got to be growing in that downward part of the spiral where it sometimes feels scary. It sometimes feels dark and alone, and you are struggling and you feel frustrated. Of course, your perception is going to shape the way that you see this process happening or feel about this process. But a lot of times when we're on the downward part of the spiral, we feel like everything's not working. And we feel like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? And we forget, unless we remind ourselves, which I like to remind you, that because you are on that downward part, it means that when you embrace it and you use resources to continue growing through it, you will have a big transformation or a big transition of yourself, and you will expand because the next part of the spiral is up and it's bigger. So you know how a spiral goes from small on the inner part and it keeps expanding out and out and out, but you can't get to the next evolution of the outer part of the spiral unless you go through the downward part of the curve. And so I like to remind myself of this all the time, and I like to remind you of this because sometimes when you're on that downward part, there are feelings of wanting to give up. And I am your cheerleader and your ally. That is probably the biggest role I feel I play in being here consistently on this podcast, is that I want to remind you each and every week that you're not alone, that I want to give you resources and inspiration. And sometimes I need that too. And this podcast is that for me. This is a cathartic experience where I get to share myself over the years. You know, this is episode 353, and I've been podcasting for 6 years. So if you go back and listen to all of the episodes, you will hear a lot of my transformational journey. And so this month of July, I decided to take off. There were many reasons for it. I was feeling burnt out. I was feeling inspired to take a month off. I felt like, well, you know, July often podcast listenership goes down because people are on vacation and doing their summer things. And I just felt this urge, this inspiration, and also like an intuitive flash that it was time to take a down month. And so I worked some, but mostly I did a lot of inward growth work. I did a lot of crying. I did a lot of journaling and things I'm going to talk to you about that are resources for when you're going through big transformations. So let me interweave what happened for me in July and what's been going on through sharing resources with you. So the first resource that you want to lean on when you're in a big transformation or a big transition, and actually let's define a big transformation or big transition. These are typically life-altering, business-altering moments in your life where all of a sudden you start to question everything and you think, wow, nothing is the way that I thought it was. It's not as I think it is. And you have something that shifts your perceptions of who you are as a person, of what you've built in your business, of relationships in your life. And so you start to really question who you are, why you're here, where you're going. What's the point? Why are we here and what are we doing? When you start to have those feelings, it means that you're on a growth curve or you're on a growth edge and you're about to break through to the next version of yourself. Keep in mind that when you are a growth-minded person and you are focusing intentionally on being someone who grows constantly, you're going to feel this a lot. And this is challenging sometimes because, man, in my group coaching the other day, one of my clients was sharing how one of her clients was saying, can I just make it stop? Can I just stop growing? I just don't want to learn any more lessons. And it feels like that often when you are a person who's decided to increase your consciousness, you've decided to become the highest version of yourself, that means you're never going to stop growing. And the challenges that come your way aren't going to stop because you're asking for them. When we say to the universe, hey, universe, I am ready to live in my fullest potential, it doesn't mean you just get granted living in your fullest potential. It means you've got to break through all of your unconscious blocks. You've got to heal all of your wounds. You've got to face all of your shit so that you can become the most empowered version of yourself. That's a pretty serious growth cycle, right? That's not going to just be a week of focusing on growth. This is a lifetime adventure, and things will surprise you sometimes. And, so I like to share with people when they start working with me, I say, this probably isn't going to look like you expect, and you're going to think that you come to work with me for one reason. And at the end of it, you will realize many different things that you came to me for that were not what you thought. Because typically we mask our growth and we mask the things that we're struggling with, thinking consciously that it's this one thing that I've got to fix. And if I just fix that, everything will be better. And it usually is not that thing that you think it is. And so this is sometimes confusing and sometimes irritating, usually liberating, almost always enlightening, where you move up the scale of consciousness. And so, I want you just to remember that when you're in that big transition and you're in a big transformation, it just means that you're on the growth cycle. And if you're a person who's focused on growth, this is probably never going to end. You might have longer stints of reprieve from it, and you might have that, as the spiral expands, think about how the circles get bigger and bigger. So the downward part takes longer to get to. But I will say my experience of it so far has been, now that I'm on that outer edge of the spiral, because I've spent a lot of time focusing on inner growth work, when I get to the down takes a little longer because it's bigger stuff. It's like the darkest shadow parts that I'm moving through and working through. And so this one in July for me has been real big. And I've been on the downward spiral in July pretty big time. So let me share with you the resources as I share, stories that have happened to me through July and that led up to it, so that you can move through this journey with me and we can talk about what to do when you feel these big, scary moments in your life. And, I feel like sometimes I do a good job here of sharing my inner world. I think I share quite a bit. And then sometimes I don't share things when I'm in the middle of processing them because I don't know how to talk about them yet and I'm not sure what's going to happen. And it's always challenging to know as a coach how much to share. I want you to know that I'm a resource for you. And there's this idea in your mind that you've got to be always on and always awesome. And that's not true. I'm human. I go through really hard stuff too. And I don't always know how much to share here. So, sometimes I go for it. Typically that works out great because I have people share with me a lot that they appreciate my vulnerability and my authenticity in what I share. So, I just want to be me and I want to be seen and heard and loved for who I am. And so, if shares that I offer here are challenging for you, perhaps look within and question why it's challenging for you and what the judgment is, because typically judgment says more about you than the other person, right? The person you're judging is just a mere reflection of your inner processing that you haven't processed, so your shadow part. So I'll preface everything I'm going to say with that. So let's drop into resources. Number 1. So this is a resource that you want to use when you are in a big transition in your life or business. So actually, I'm going to give you all 6 that I want to talk about, and then we'll dive into each. So number 1, time alone to feel and practice self-care. Number 2, journaling. Number 3, meditation and EFT tapping. Number 4, clean up the clutter and purge. Number 5, growth-minded conversations. And number 6, there's a book that I highly recommend by Michael Singer, and I'll share it with you when I get there. So, number 1, time alone to feel and practice self-care. So when you are in a big transition and you're questioning everything and you're wondering what the point of it all is, not in this way of like, oh, I want to kill myself, more in a way of like, what am I doing? What makes me happy? Why am I doing these specific actions every day? Why am I cultivating these specific relationships? Those kinds of things. And when you're in a place like that, you really want to spend time alone to feel your feelings, to allow yourself to feel, and practice a lot of self-care. So for me, in the month of July, this looked like a solo trip. I went on a solo trip up to Breckenridge, which I grew up in Summit County, which Breckenridge is one of the places in Summit County. And I went to this little condo and I spent 2 days alone and I journaled, I don't know, probably at least 20 pages, which is number 2, journaling. And I also, in the month of July, I went and got a massage and I went to chiropractic twice. I got my nails done. Like, I just spent a lot of time taking care of myself. And in the middle of all of this, I was feeling a lot. So one big thing that I haven't shared here, because I haven't really understood how it was going to play out. A year ago, my daughters, I have 4 kids. I have 2 older daughters and then 2 sons, blended family. So 3 biological kids and then 1 bonus stepson. And my oldest daughters wrote me a letter and told me they didn't want to talk to me. They shared that they needed a break and some of the things that had been hard for them with me. And I was devastated. I did not expect this. I have been, so I thought, very, very close with my kids and very open and lots of room for conversations. And so when I got this letter, of course, I went into a very sad place. And there was also a part of me that thought, okay, this is temporary. That's okay. They're growing. They need their independence. And so this was a year ago, right around my birthday, and my birthday's in July. And so this year, a year had gone by, and I reached out to them and wrote a letter, and they didn't reply to it. And this is when it really hit me, like, this is real. Like, my kids don't want to talk to me. Holy shit. And it spun me out. Of course, throughout the whole year, I've had a lot of challenge around it. Family events are very hard, and feeling horrible about yourself, like, oh my God, I'm a bad mom, or am I a bad mom? Why are they feeling, just so many unknowns that you don't know what to do with. I don't know, for those of you out there who have experienced estrangement, it's hard. It brings up a lot, especially the feeling for me of not having a way to talk to them to work through it. And so, when I went on this solo trip, that was mostly what I was processing. That and, playing with some business transitions and sitting with, what is the meaning of all of this? And I cried so much, just like buckets and buckets, and journaled and let myself feel. And, in that recognition of like, wow, this could be permanent. I don't know. It could be a decade. It could be lots of more years. I don't know. And so sitting with how I feel about it and letting myself feel what I feel about it, instead of, finally coming to that place of acceptance, because in this year it's been like, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Is this real? All the stages of grief that you go through. And so, in that big transition of accepting what is, I spent a lot of time alone and journaled and meditated and tapped. And those were critical for me. And so, if you're going through anything hard, or when you do, because if you're a growth-filled person, and I know you wouldn't be here on this podcast if you weren't, let yourself take care of yourself. And I know this sounds strange, but a lot of times what we do when we're going through hard times is we pretend we're okay, we push away the feelings, and we avoid. Mickey Singer says, the mind is a place the soul goes to hide from the heart. Ooh, the mind is a place the soul goes to hide from the heart. Man, that quote blew my mind when I heard it. And it's so true. Even when I think about doing mindset work, we're always thinking about our thoughts and how our thoughts create our reality. And realistically, it's our feelings and our thoughts that are entangled. And the way you feel is based on your thoughts. The way your thoughts tend to move is based on your feelings, and your feelings are what magnetize your reality to you. So if you're avoiding how you feel, you are subconsciously attracting those feelings that you're not letting yourself feel. Carl Jung says what you avoid not only persists, but grows in size. And so if you're avoiding something, it's actually growing. And it's actually what's getting put into the quantum field. In a law of attraction perspective, you're actually putting it into the quantum field more powerfully because it's growing underneath the surface. You're just not willing to face it. So it's critically important that when you start to notice this stuff come up and you're like, whoa, I'm in a big transition. This is scary. This is hard. Let yourself feel. And while you're letting yourself feel, this is probably some big stuff, especially if it's a huge transition, like the one I'm experiencing both with my business and with my kids. It's not going to be like a day of doing this. You're talking about an evolution of your soul, of your relationships, of your family, of your life, of your money. It's going to take a little bit of time, and it's going to take a lot of self-care. So just make sure that you're taking really good care of yourself, whatever that means to you. For me, time alone is critically important. I like to get massages and chiropractic, even acupuncture, to start to move these energies through me and not have them be stuck in my body, because your body holds on to the trauma. So you want to help yourself move through these things through practicing self-care. And I just like those modalities for doing that. So a lot of time alone. I got really sick in July. I had this like a swollen gland, and then my honey Abe came home from Scouts camp. He took his son on a week-long Scouts trip, and when he got back, he started feeling sick, and then I got sick. I had 102.5 fever on my birthday, which I always look at that as a spiritual transformation anytime I get sick anyway, and just how it corresponded with the year anniversary of my kids not wanting to talk to me and my birthday. I just thought, wow, this is some big spiritual stuff that I'm working through. And so as I laid there on my birthday sick and hot and achy, I just, wow, it was a hard day. And in that hard day, I let myself feel it. It was like, wow, I feel sad. I feel scared. I feel angry, all the things. And, when you're sick, it's a little hard to practice self-care, other than, of course, I just let myself have a lot of downtime. So, this is another symptom of big transformations, is getting sick. Sometimes we get sick when we're sabotaging. For me, I'm usually clear about, am I sabotaging here, or am I sick because I'm going through something big and it's part of the cathartic process? And for me, typically, I don't use sickness anymore as a ULP, an upper limit problem that Gay Hendricks talks about in his book, The Big Leap. Sickness can be one of those things that you use to avoid something you don't want to do. I used to do that a lot when I was, back in the days before I learned all of these things. Now, when I get sick, I know that I probably have been avoiding some of my feelings, but that it's finally letting it come up. And so I get sick sometimes when I am in a big spiritual process. So if you're getting sick, pay attention to why you're getting sick. Practice more alone time. Make sure you're letting yourself feel and practicing self-care. So in addition, journaling. Journaling is critical. You all know that I have a journaling program. Basically, it's the core foundation of my Law of Attraction for Business School is journaling, meditation, and a daily lesson. Plus, we do live weekly business coaching and mindset coaching and tapping, all kinds of cool stuff. But journaling is the key foundation that you do every single day to reprogram yourself along with that meditation. And so journaling is something that will help you as a resource. It's your Bible of yourself. It's you getting to know yourself. It's your safe space to share how you feel. It's your safe space to let it all out, let it be heard, let yourself be known. It's your place to process. It's your place to gain clarity. And I know some people struggle with what to journal. That's why I created my Law of Attraction for Business School. If you haven't gone there yet, just go lawofattractionforbusiness.school. Link is in the show notes as well. Law of Attraction Attraction for Business School free trial. Really incredible program. This is like my heart and soul gets poured into it. Very similar to my podcast, but it's shorter daily lessons that you can lean on to help you keep growing on that upward spiral growth trajectory in both life and business. And, when you journal, I ask you a journaling question every day so that you have something to play with, because sometimes people will stare at their blank journal and they don't exactly know what to write. So I help you with this. Even if you're good at journaling, the questions will still help inspire new thought for you and help you break through new parts of yourself. So, when I journal in a situation like I had in July, I let it fly. I just write what's going on and how do I feel and how do I feel about this? And I just write. And so for me, that comes very naturally. I know that doesn't for everybody. So when I say journal, if you're not someone who naturally knows what to write when you open up your journal, then definitely join my program, because it'll help you expand your thinking and your feeling and your mind and open up new layers of consciousness for yourself, so you can keep moving up that map of consciousness or the scale of consciousness, so that you can move out of guilt and shame and fear and move into love and joy and enlightenment. And enlightenment's a pretty big one. We're talking when you become enlightened, you are one of those that you like Jesus or the Buddha, so awesome. We all want to move toward that. When we're growing ourselves in this lifetime, it's probably that we're moving out of guilt and shame, which are the lowest vibrational frequencies, up to a state of love and joy and peace. And to do that, it requires knowing yourself and increasing your consciousness, which journaling is a huge part of that. And it's an easy resource. It's free. You can do it anywhere. And so I really encourage you, when you're going through anything in life, do it every day, especially when you're in big transitions, journal more. This is tied to meditation and EFT tapping. So meditation is I think in a lot of ways people meditate to let go of thoughts. And yes, absolutely, that's a method. Another thing that meditation does is helps you feel your feelings. So you're sitting in a state of connecting with yourself, and it opens up your heart, which allows you to feel what you're feeling instead of avoiding what you're feeling. So I don't always look at meditation as you pushing away the thoughts so that you can get into this idea or concept of meditation where you go, empty mind, empty mind, empty mind. And you're like trying to force yourself into an empty mind. And really what you're doing is resisting your feelings. And so meditation can be used in many different ways. I like to have meditation be thought of as it's connecting with yourself. So you're connecting with yourself. And that means that whatever you are having trapped inside of you is potentially going to come up during meditation. And so for me, a lot of times when I meditate, I cry, or it's like all of a sudden I go, oh, that's there. And I can release it by feeling it. Not release it because I'm avoiding it, but I feel it first. I let it really hit me in the heart or wherever in my body it's being stored. And I feel it. So I'll often just cry, like have tears coming down and just feel that feeling of like release, and then let it go and let it shift through you. So it brings me to a state of awareness where I recognize that I'm feeling something, so then I can choose what to do with it. Instead of meditation being a forced thing of I've got to do it a certain way so that I can say I meditate and I get to that higher state of consciousness, or whatever the weird checkboxes that we put on ourselves are. So I like to use meditation as a place of connection with myself. Same with journaling. EFT tapping, the way that I perceive EFT tapping, so this is emotional freedom technique, and there's a series of tapping that you do. You Google it. You can, actually I had a guest on several years ago who taught EFT tapping. So if you go to my podcast and just type in EFT, you'll find that episode. Really awesome. And of course, there are tons of resources out there. And I do EFT tapping in my Law of Attraction for Business school as well, because it's such a powerful tool. The reason I really like it is because when you tap, you say statements that actually help you face what you're feeling instead of pretending what you feel isn't there. So emotional freedom technique, the freedom part is that you are feeling your feelings and stating them instead of pushing them away. So for example, you say a statement when you're tapping, let's say on your karate chop point, which is the fatty part of your hand. So you use your dominant hand to tap and your non-dominant hand is the karate chop, and it's this outer edge below your pinky that's kind of the fatty part, and you tap on it. And as you're tapping, you just breathe and you say, let's say a statement, you say, even though I've been feeling, let's apply this to my situation with my daughters. I would say, even though I've been feeling really sad and disconnected from my daughters, I still deeply and profoundly love myself. Even though my daughters don't want to talk to me, I still deeply and profoundly love myself. And right now, tears are welling up for me. And it brings up the emotions instead of pushing them away, which allows you to transform through the process instead of fighting it. And that's the point of EFT tapping. So if that is something you want to experience, come hang out with me in the school and or just get a resource online. There's really great ones. EFT tapping has really been one of the most transformational tools I feel like I've ever used. I actually have an EFT teacher in my school who is awesome. So another great resource for you there. So another resource, number 4, clean up the clutter and purge. Now, what I did in the month of July is I combined all my files into one place. So I've rebranded several times, and I had 4 Google Drives with, lots of gigabytes of data, and I cleaned them up and put them all into one file. Now, I know this sounds like, well, that's not that big of a deal. It took me 40 hours because I have a lot of files over the last 6 years of building a business. And it felt so cathartic to see my journey even through these files. It was like, wow, I've done a lot. And get rid of things that I don't need anymore. Put them all in one place. And so you could do this in your closet. You could do this in your house. You could do this in your files. You could do this in your car. Anywhere, your garage, anywhere that you feel is cluttered, clean it up and see what happens. It shifts energy big time. Now, I do recommend that you do this in a place that you spend a lot of time. For me, I'm on my computer all day, every day, mostly because that's where my whole business is run. So that was the space that made the most sense to do this. And it just felt so cathartic to purge. There's something very cleansing about letting go of the old to make space for the new. And in my business, I've been having big transitions, big transformations, rethinking things. If you've followed me, you know that my business profitability cycle is to create, test, refine, and scale. And I'm always doing this. I very much practice what I preach. So I'll create something, I'll test it for a while, sometimes a short period of time, sometimes a long period of time, and then I refine it so that I can then take it to the next level. And so I've been playing with my programs that I offer and sitting with what's working and what's not. And as you know, I brought Abe, my husband, into my business. So he left his C-suite job and came to work with me full time. And that was a massive transformation. And some of it's been really hard. And we've talked about that a lot in July. Like, what do we want the future to look like? Because the role that we've had him in is not a great fit and it's not working. And we had to face that. We chose to face it. It was like, okay, this isn't working. And it's not that him and I aren't working because we love each other immensely. It's that the way that we have him in the business is not working the way we thought it would. And so we've been sitting in that breakdown and that transition and that transformation. And so, some of the cleaning up the clutter and the purging was a decision to move the company in a different direction or in an expansive direction. And so we're adding a layer and doing some different work together, building up, doing Build Your Wealth Solutions, which is another extension of money mindset, but really practical tools that we're teaching entrepreneurs. And so in cleaning up the clutter of the past and letting go of certain things, there's big shifts in law of attraction for business. And so that space couldn't be created for the new business growth if we didn't slow down enough to let go of the past. And so wherever you are right now, that is a tool that can be very helpful for you. If you're clinging to the past, you cannot allow the future to come. If you're clinging to your past story, your past ideas that you had about what things should be, then it's hard to bring in the new. You're creating resistance, right? And so you're not open to the new. It'd be like filling up your house with your ex's clothes and pictures, but then you're going on dates hoping to bring in a new person. And then they come to your house and they see all those old pictures and they go like, wait, is there room here for me? You're not over that yet, clearly. And so that's what I mean by cleaning up the clutter and purging. You've got to make room for the new. You want to break down the old box of yourself to expand and break free from any boxes. Allow yourself to grow by letting go of the old stories you've told yourself about who you are and what you thought you even wanted. And this can be scary. It's scary for me sometimes when I think something is going to work in my business a specific way. I get very attached to the idea of it. I build a lot of stories in my mind around it. I envision a lot around it. So then when it doesn't work the way I expect, it can be scary to let go. And in law of attraction, I'm very scripted and I always do future focus and envisioning. And then when it doesn't work, I know there's resistance. And sometimes I cling too long to things. Ask Abe. It's like we held on to this idea of what our business would be for this whole time. And then it took us 18 months to be like, this isn't working, because we had such a powerful vision of how we wanted it to look together. And so it's been hard to let it go. Like, oh my God, it's been hard to, it's confusing to think about what it means. We struggled with it because we thought it meant, well, does that mean you have to go back to work? And does that mean we're failures? And just all the things. So if you're having these thoughts, you're human. I'm human. It happens. Be willing to use these resources to start to move through those stuck points. And it's okay. Again, go back to number 1, practice self-care. You're going to go through hard things. Everyone, me included. And it sometimes is challenging, and that's okay. Number 5, growth-minded conversations. So this is where it's really critical to have a community of people who support you, who see you, who can ask the hard questions, who hold you through the hard things, like in a physical way and or in a spiritual way. I've got a mix of course, my community in the Law of Attraction for Business School. I look forward to those meetings every week. It's my family. And so that's growth-minded conversations. And then on the end of support, I've got coaches, I've got friends, I've got Abe, I've got family. Make sure that you're having growth-minded conversations with people. One thing that's happened in this process with my daughters is that I've become really close with my mom, because I've realized how hard I've been on my mom in the past and how much I held her responsible for it in my childhood and how much that's not fair to her anymore. So we've had some really incredible conversations, and I've really loved her differently and had some growth-filled conversations that I didn't think we could have. And it's been so heart fulfilling. And then friends and just different people that show up when you open up yourself to have those growth-minded conversations. Again, if you feel alone out there as an entrepreneur, the Law of Attraction for Business School is going to be so heart fulfilling to you. Law of Attraction for Business.school. It's a beautiful community of people. So if you're longing for that, come hang out with us. Number 6, book. This book, oh my goodness. So Mickey Singer is the person who wrote The Untethered Soul. Highly recommend that read. And I think if you haven't read that yet, start there. Yet I found this book, I don't remember how. I think I just was looking up growth-minded books. I read a lot on Audible, and I found this. I'm pretty sure it's only on Audible. It's called Living from a Place of Surrender. Living from a Place of Surrender by Michael Singer. It's on Audible, and I've listened to this book several times, and it's my go-to anytime I feel stuck or upset, angry. Anything that I'm just like, angsty and falling. I feel like I'm falling apart. I go to this book. And I had listened to it when I was going through a challenging time with Abe, and we were having this fight, and it was repetitive. It was upsetting. We were working through it, but I just kept we were stuck. And so I listened to this book, and it changed everything, because I was able to see it from a very different perspective. And then, when I received the letter from my girls saying that they didn't want to talk to me, the first thing I did was went on a 10-mile hike, and I just listened to this book the whole time. I'd pause it and cry and sit and just meditate, and then I'd listen to the book and walk some more. And it was just like I needed all of that time to process the information and process what was going on and let go. So, living from a place of surrender, one of the things that he really powerfully presents there is that the reason that we suffer is because of preference. So we suffer because we prefer things to be different than they are. So living from a place of surrender, you're letting go of your preferences. And that's really interesting. I've had some inner battles with this, because as a manifestation coach, you are to decide what you want and pursue it. Right? So my 3-step manifestation formula is decide with certainty and clarity what you want, take a step in the direction, and then let the universe bring you the way. Now, in some ways, this feels like the antithesis of living from a place of surrender, right? Where you're like, well, wait, I have a preference. If that causes suffering, that's the opposite of saying I want something and I go for it. And so I sit in that quite a bit, okay, how do I let myself want what I want, go for it, and let it come to me, versus just surrendering and let things come to me. And it's interesting when you think about the law of attraction, the number one reason that we don't manifest what we want is because of resistance. So to me, these two go together really well, because when you live from a place of surrender, it's okay to want what you want, but you detach from the expectation of it and you let it come to you in an easy way. Ultimately, I would say that Mickey Singer is very spiritually minded. He's very much about allowing. So Jerry and Esther Hicks, Abraham Hicks, they talk a lot about the art of surrendering and allowing. It's one of their main principles that they teach in Law of Attraction, where you let go and you allow. Otherwise, you're causing resistance. So you know what you want and you go for it, but you let go and allow instead of forcing and thinking you have to know the way or it's going to pan out the way that you exactly think. That is not letting the universe bring it to you. So when I say number 3, let the universe bring it to you, if you're forcing it to be the way you think it needs to be, that is not you letting go and allowing. Right? That's you forcing. That's going to push it away because it's causing resistance. So living from a place of surrender is a very interesting coupling. And I've seen videos before where Mickey Singer talks about, and I don't even know if this is true, because I'll see thumbs like on YouTube, and it's like, Mickey Singer says the law of attraction is bullshit or whatever, and I don't listen to the whole thing because I don't know. I think sometimes it's just clickbait. I don't think that any spiritual truth is going to contradict itself. Mickey Singer is talking about living from a place of letting go of preference, letting go of resistance, allowing yourself to be, and trusting the universe. That is absolutely in alignment with the law of attraction, and knowing and loving yourself and inviting new, bigger, expansive opportunities to come to you. So, keep hanging out with me as I continue to mull through these things, because, hey, I'm human and I have new perceptions a year from now, and I have new perceptions now that I didn't have a year ago. So, this is an evolving process, and I love that you're on the journey with me. I appreciate you being here, and especially as I'm back for this first episode back in August. Let's recap the resources for you to move through big transitions in your life and business. Number 1, time alone to feel and practice self-care. Number 2, journaling. Number 3, meditation and EFT tapping. Number 4, clean up the clutter and purge. Number 5, growth-minded conversations. And number 6, check out the book Living from a Place of Surrender by Mickey Singer. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being here. Be sure to check out my Law of Attraction for Business School. I'm certain that you will get a ton out of it. It's a really incredible program that comes straight from my heart, my mind, my body, my soul. I put a lot of consciousness into it, and it's awesome for growth, for coaching, for community. It's a really wonderful home for you if this podcast is resonating with you. So Law of Attraction for Business School. Until next time, I am sending you giant hugs and money magnet high fives.